Hello. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Hopefully, someone can see this. So, Sunday morning, my time. It is 10 a.m. Here in Fort Worth, Texas. And I'm Patrick. I'm the founder and chief editor of the Taoist Online. And this is session 2 of our Taoism lessons. All right. So, for those who may not have seen session 1, since it didn't get recorded, what we're doing is we're going through a book called 365 Tao, which I had and is now somewhere, but I have it digitally. So, as you can see on the side of our screen here, that is the book, so we can all follow along. 365 Tao is a daily meditation guide by a gentleman named Dingming Tao. Each chapter is very short, just a quick verse, words of wisdom, and then a explanation of those. And we're going to get to those today, of course. But what I thought I'd also do, since this is the first one going live, is I want to take you through some basics as well. I want to talk about the books that I started with, some of the foundational texts, and we'll go from there. So, this tiny little book, this is the Tao Te Ching, translated by Stephen Mitchell. This is the pocket version. It's very small. There's a larger version of this, but this is the Tao Te Ching is the seminal text written or collected about 2,500 years ago, give or take a few hundred years, depending on where you're starting. The legend has it is that this was written by a wise man named Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu actually translates into wise old man, like a wise man, old man. So there's some debate on whether or not he existed, but I like to believe he did. The story goes is that he was kind of fed up with all the war in the kingdom at the time and left to leave it all behind. And when he did, a guard stopped him at the gate and said, "Would you please write down any parting wisdom you have for us?" And one night he wrote 81 poems, verses, and we call it the Tao Te Ching, or the Way, as you'll kind of hear it translated most of the time. Book of the Way. So yeah, I use the word translation loosely for Stephen Mitchell. He even kind of admits that it's more of an interpretation than it is a direct translation. What he really tried to do, and the reason why you'll find this most often, is that he takes a lot of these concepts that are intentionally contradictory and smooths them out into more modern phrases. So that can be a little difficult to come to grips. Like, why would you do that with a sacred religious text? But he did. And if it's the book I started with, which is why I show it to everybody. There's an audiobook with him narrating, which is just fantastic. I used to listen to the audiobook on the way to work every day. You can actually just go to YouTube, like up in the top corner here, and search for it, and you'll find the whole audiobook. I don't condone piracy, But I'm not the one who did it either, so you might as well take advantage of it before it gets taken down, right? But it's been there for years, so I highly recommend it. If you want a more accurate translation, my favorite is this guy. This is the Tao Te Ching translated by Guy Fu Feng and Jane English. I love this one. This is definitely a good second one, I would say. It was written back in the 70s. Jane English was a scholar who partnered with Guy Fu Feng, who's a Taoist priest, I believe, and they sat together and kind of individually, line by line, tried to make a accurate English translation. And there are dozens of translations of this. I mean, these are just two of, I would say, like 100, or more. Yeah, if you're looking to kind of get started, then Stephen Mitchell is where I'd go, and then you can go up from there. Derek Lin, I don't have a physical copy of his version, but Derek Lin actually has a YouTube channel where he goes through chapter by chapter, and I highly recommend his YouTube channel. It is amazing. His translation is also very accurate, very literal. It makes it a little harder to understand if you're new, because the language, ancient Chinese doesn't always translate perfectly into English. Neither does any language, really. But he does a good job in his YouTube series of really breaking down the concepts, breaking down the words, talking about the translations and how he got there. It's really cool. Derek Lin is who I would go check him out too. Okay, one more book to talk about before we get into the chapters for today. This is a really cool book. The second text that most people go to for Taoism is called Zhuangzi. Zhuangzi was a gentleman who lived more or less after. There's some debate. Since we don't really know if Lao Tzu was a real person, then there's some debate whether or not they lived at the same time. He does seem to reference Lao Tzu. But this is actually a comic book version of Zhuangzi by C.C. Sai. Let's show you. So what this gentleman did is take the chapters and lessons of Zhuangzi and animate them. It is super cool. It's really fun. Some people like Zhuangzi better than Lao Tzu. Zhuangzi is funny. His intentionally, he picked names that don't make any sense. That he would never pick names like that, like animals. He calls people by like weird, strange animal names. But yeah, it's funny. It's really taught through, I would say, humor, in much more narrative style, while Lao Tzu is much more poetic, much more mysterious in his writing. So yeah, those are the three books I wanted to show you guys. Oh, you know what? I do have today's book. Yeah, it was buried under the other books. So this is 365 Tao by Ding Tao. Last week, we started on chapter 1. So we're going to go here. You should be able to see this. There you go. Very cool. Hooray for Amazon. All right. Let's talk a little bit about chapter 2. And I do see the chat, so if you guys have questions, please let me know. All right. Chapter 2 was about absolution. The poem for the chapter says, washing at dawn, rinse away dreams, protect the gods within, and clarify the inner spirit. This chapter talks a lot about your kind of looking within to find yourself. I've written a little bit about this on our Medium publication, the Taoist.online. In Taoism, it's really all about your internal nature, right? We're going to hear about that a lot, probably every lesson. It's about looking within. And by looking within, you can see the whole universe. There's a chapter in the Tao Te Ching that talks about that you would never need to see the universe. You can just stand at your window and see all of existence. And a lot of Taoist texts are contradictory by nature. They're supposed to be. Makes it more mystical. But yes, mystical, maybe overly complicated. Maybe it's a little bit of flair, but it's truth as well, which is great. For example, in chapter 1 of the Tao Te Ching, and I'll just go ahead and read it off. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. Now, those two sentences are the ones you'll see everywhere. As soon as you open it up, bam, there they are. The reason why this comes first in almost all books is it tries to get the concept of Tao to you. And that is to say that we are not capable of comprehending the Tao or talking about it, right? The word, the phrase Tao is not its real name. It's just what people came up with to convey meaning. And what you'll learn a lot about in Taoism is the idea that you can be overly knowledge, that you can learn too much. You can learn so much that perhaps it interferes with your natural state. And that's what this is getting at, right? The name that can be named is not the eternal name. So, like, you're not going to fly out into space and go meet the Tao, and the Tao's like, yep, that's who I am. That's my name. Thanks. Nope. That's not how that works in this one. And that's what the first verse is about too. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. So your describing it in words does not accurately convey what Tao is, right? What it truly is. We can kind of describe the effects of it. We can see its manifestations if you look a little bit further down that chapter. But we can't describe what it really is. That being said, they wrote the book to try to describe what the Tao is. So it's contradictory by nature. That's what that means. So going back to our chapter, one of the verses that stood out to me is here. It says, while cleansing, we naturally cool. Next. There we go. It is believed that there are 36,000 gods and goddesses in the body. If we continually eat bad foods, intoxicate ourselves, allow filth to accumulate everywhere outside or inside of ourselves, then these gods abandon us in our disgust. I understand a lot of people look at Taoism as a philosophy, and that's fine. Christianity can be viewed as a philosophy. But if you've been raised Christian, you probably know that that's not what Christianity was meant for. right? Or it's not what Christianity really stands for now, anyway, right? You have to believe that Jesus was a real person and that God is a real being. So with Taoism, it's very similar. If you go to China and you find a Taoist and then ask them, are there gods? Of course they would say yes. There are several gods in Taoism. Now, if you ask, let's say, a Westerner who's a Taoist, and they say, is the Tao a god? They'd probably tell you no. Say it's more of a force of nature. So which one's true? I guess it's up to you. But I can tell you the deeper you go into Taoism, especially in the texts that came after Zhuangzi and Lao Tzu, you will find gods pretty quickly, and lots of them. So it's up to you. It's up to you to read and educate and learn what you want. And that's the great part about Taoism, because it is intentionally vague and contradictory. Unlike some other religions, you are supposed to feel the Tao, right? You're not supposed to just learn about it. You're supposed to find it in yourself and in everything around you. So, yeah. Let's go on. All right. Devotion. This would have been Tuesday's chapter. Tuesday's poem says, make the crooked straight, make the straight to follow, gather water, fire, and light, bring the world to a single point. This chapter talks about devotion. It talks really about, like, here's the key. Proper devotion lies not simply in a headlong course. It also requires fortitude, inner strength. No one can make you be devoted, right? I mean, I can discipline you, or we can, have an authority figure discipline us, teachers, parents, friends, right? They can get on to you. Why aren't you working out every day? You're not devoted. So yeah, devotion has to come from within, right? It has to be something that you choose to do for yourself. And that's really what this chapter was attempting to describe. I love the end of this chapter. If we see our path clearly and our personalities are completely unified, then there is no distinction between the outer world and the inner one. Nothing is far away anymore. Nothing is not open to us. That is why it is said that the world is like a single point, so strong is its devotion that there is nothing that is not a part of it. Curious, right? Makes you think. Makes you have to sit there for a little bit and kind of meditate on that, which is why these are daily meditations. There's a lot to internalize in each chapter. I hope you guys are reading through this every day. Typically what I'm doing is, if I can, I'll read one each morning or in the evening, and then just sit there, put on some music, and just let that sit with me. Think about your life. Think about when you've been devoted. Think about when you wanted to do something, but you failed. Did you fail because something beyond your control happened? Did you just lose interest? Right? Like right now, I'm running these streams in the YouTube channel. I'm writing almost every day. I run the publication with a very strong team of helpers. And that's a lot, Then I have a job, a real job that pays me. I have children, a wife, we're sick, Most of them are sick right now with COVID or strep or something else. So it's busy. It's really busy lately. And if I'm not devoted to them, to my practice, and to my hobbies and writing and my job, I'm not going to make it, right? I don't know how anyone could make it with all this unless you're devoted. You really have to devote that inner strength. So let's go on. All right. Chapter 4 was about reflection. This would have been 2, 3, 4, Monday, Tuesday. So, yeah, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Moon above water, sit in solitude. So water, let's just stop right there and talk about water in Taoism. Water is the example that you'll find everywhere about Taoism, whether it's from Bruce Lee. There's a real famous Bruce Lee speech about water, about the flow. So let's dig into that. There's a verse in the Tao Te Ching that talks about if you asking if you can be still, because when you have like water, like muddy water, so when you have muddy water and you let it sit, that sediment will sink to the bottom and the water becomes clear. But if the water is constantly churning, the mud and dirt and rocks will always be in there and you'll never be able to see through the water. So too is your inner self, is your nature. You're always running around crazy and, being on your phone and just the insane number of notifications we can pack on our phones just blows my mind. For example, my wife has like her email app and it has over 10,000 unread emails. It's gotten so long that you can't even see the whole number anymore. It just like cuts it off and like truncates it. But we're at that level of existing right now in, at least my Western society, my American society. It's just everywhere. And that's the filth. That's the dirt and the sediment and the rocks and the sticks. And we just turn ourselves all the time. We're just always running. And the crazy part about it is we like it that way. We seem to really enjoy, we seem to enjoy it. We're taught that this is the way it's supposed to go. Yeah, I see Aldi in chat just said that, he turned off all the notifications on his phone. Good for you, man. Yeah, I think you'd be surprised how slow your day will go if you just turn that off. Just one simple thing, just for a day. Just turn off notifications and watch how much time you get back. How bored you'll feel. It's really something. I think you'll be surprised. I know people, as soon as their butt touches a seat, they're just like, right? And it's what they do. We're taught from an early age that, we need a job and we have to work 8 to 5 and we have to sleep from this hour to this hour. We wake up and we have breakfast, and breakfast consists of these foods, and then we go to work, and then lunch consists of these foods because you don't want to be unhealthy. And then you come home and a dinner and you have a hearty, some sort of meat, but not too much meat, but you can have this amount to drink, and it's just, and you go to sleep at this time, and it just starts over every single day, all day long. And you have to go to college, and you have to get married, and you have to have kids, you have to have a job, and you have to have a house, and a car, and you have to own all these things and borrow money and be in debt. If you're not in debt, you can't buy anything. That's how busy our world has become. is that you need to be in debt to buy a house or a car. If you don't have any credit or debt, they just don't trust you. And how backwards is that? So here, we find the example of water. I'm going to take a little bit to kind of use my favorite analogy. Let's pretend that your life is a river. So rivers, as we know, flow in one direction, downhill, because of gravity and other things. I am told a lot, I'm asked a lot, that if Tao is a direction of nature, can you go against it? Right? Is everything Tao? Well, yeah. But can you act unharmoniously against Tao? Sure. Can, actually. The Tao is not an excuse to do anything you want. And in fact, if it were that way, we wouldn't have all these books describing things, right? Actions, reactions. So if you're swimming inside this river of your life, there's an easy way to be inside that river. Is you hang out and you float downstream. You don't struggle. Just, you're not swimming with the current. You're not swimming against the current. You're just floating and relaxing. I would say, for most of my life, I've been swimming as fast as I can down that river, right? Which is also really tiring. If you're swimming in the river and you don't stop and rest, you'll drown, or almost drown, or nearly drown. Someone might have to come in and save you sometimes. But you can also swim against the current, can't you? You may not drown. You may swim. You may be a great swimmer, and you can swim against that current. But man, you are going to struggle. It's going to be a pain. It's going to be way harder that way. And can you do it? Yeah. But look at that guy. He's just floating on his back. He looks way more happy and relaxed. He's not nervous. He's not worried about where he's going. He's just, whatever comes, he's just in the flow. He's in the zone. Right? And I love that analogy. I love it. It's my favorite analogy. And you'll find lots of water and Taoism and dogs, actually. We won't get into that. But dogs are a surprising occurrence. They had a lot of dogs in China as pets already at that time. So you'll see that in text as well. Okay. So here at the end of this chapter, it says, there is no effort that we can make to still ourselves. True stillness comes naturally from moments of solitude where we allow our minds to settle. Again, back to the water example, muddy water, when you're still and you're quiet, that's when everything clears out and you can see through the water. Just as water seeks its own level, the mind will gravitate towards the body. Muddy water will become clear if allowed to stand undisturbed, and so too will the mind become clear if it is allowed to be still. Neither the water nor the moon make any effort to retrieve a reflection. In the same way, meditation will be natural and immediate. Now, there are lots of ways to meditate. We talked a little bit about it last week. And traditionally, we think meditation is just sitting in a room, super quiet. Maybe you say something over and over again. Maybe you chant. And somehow you're supposed to like reach this weird enlightened place. That's kind of like that traditional stereotypical like Buddhist kind of meditation. Well, in Taoism, it's not quite the same. In Taoism, walking can be meditation. Drawing might be meditation. Playing sport might be meditation. For example, Michael Jordan did an interview many years ago, back when he was winning championships. They asked him, "How do you do what you do? Like how can you just be so good?" And I'm paraphrasing, but he essentially said he felt like he was in the zone. When he was on, and it just came effortlessly, like flowing down a river without struggling. And the river part is mine. But we'll see this constantly in athletes of extremely high talent levels, right? They just feel like it's coming from within. And it doesn't matter what they do, they're not even thinking about it. They simply act instinctively and it happens. They are in complete control of their being. In that moment, they can just do. That is a form of meditation. In Taoism, we call that in the flow, Wu Wei. 2 words. WUWEI. Wu Wei. It is the closest thing I can describe it is being in the zone or meditating. It translates into non-action, right? I like to translate it, again, interpretations, to no effort. Effortless action is my favorite translation of it. It is the ability to do without thinking. It just happens. So at the end of this chapter, where it says, neither the water nor the moon make any effort to achieve a reflection. Wu Wei, effortless action. They simply are doing it. The moon doesn't struggle to reflect, right? It doesn't make any sense. A tree doesn't struggle to be a tree. It just is a tree, right? Meditation will help you see that natural flow in yourself. And it may be different for all of you. I'm sure it is. My favorite strange form of meditation is doing the dishes. It doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but it's very calming. I noticed I developed tinnitus, a ringing in my ear, both ears, about 2 years ago, and it just never stops, right? It's a constant kind of high-pitched ringing. And I noticed at the time that there was really only one way I could, one activity I could do where I just didn't think about it anymore, right? I was just so focused on something that everything else just faded away. And that was doing dishes. I don't know. Can't describe it. And still to this day, I do dishes every day. That's one of my chores around the house because I work from home. Just that running water, and you're focused on getting that stuff as clean as humanly possible. Yeah, it's my form. It's the 20 minutes out of the day that I don't have to do anything else. I'm not thinking about anything else. Work doesn't matter. My kids are off doing something. And just for 15 minutes, just give me the chance to do my dishes. Yeah. So that's what meditation can be, right? That's what your wu wei, your flow state, your in the zone can do and can be for you. Chapter 5 was called Sound. Wind in the cave, movement in stillness, power in silence. I'm going to read this one for you guys. In a cave, all outer sounds are smothered by rock and earth, but this makes the sounds of one's own heartbeat and breath audible. In the same way, contemplative stillness turns us away from everyday clamor, but allows us to hear the subtle in our own lives. When listening, not with the ear, but with the spirit, one can perceive the subtle sound. By entering into that sound, we enter the supreme purity. That is why so many religious traditions pray, sing, or chant as a prelude to silence. They understand that the repetition and absorption of sound leads to sacredness itself. The deepest sound is silence. This may seem paradoxical, contradictory, only if we regard silence as an absence of life and vibration. But for a meditator, silence is sound unified with all of its opposites. It is both sound and soundless. And it is in this confluence that the power of meditation emerges. So again, we have that paradoxical language. Have you guys ever studied sound or light or waves? I was a music major at the University of North Texas for a couple of years. And in our music theory class, we learned that a single note is not actually a single note. It's called the harmonic series. And when you look at the vibration of a piano string or any string, you can actually find inner vibrations within those strings. In fact, on a guitar, you can play these harmonics by gently putting for me, it would be my left hand on the fret, but not enough to push the string down, just enough to hover it right above the string and then pluck the string. And what you'll hear is, rather than the E string, you'll hear the harmonic of the E string. That could be an octave, could be a fifth. I won't go. If you guys have studied music, it's made up of many different notes. You can also hear it really well in a bell tower. If you're by a church, or if you're by a college campus, for example, and you hear actual bells, you can hear the harmonics inside the bell chime. Typically, they sound like dark minor tones are usually brought out. Now they have decided they've started to design bells to where those minor tones become major tones to make the bells sound a little happier. So that's why when you hear like a happy song played in church bells, it sounds kind of dark and like creepy. It's the minor harmonics coming out of those tones. But back to here. When it talks about the deepest sound is silence, and that silence is sound unified with all of its opposites, does that seem to make more sense now? Like, if we take what we scientifically know about vibrations of sound, that's what they're getting at. It is as scientific as it is spiritual. sound, especially for me, and the way I had to deal with my tinnitus is that for a long time, I didn't want to hear the ringing anymore, right? You just want to go back to the absence of sound. But what I had to do was convince myself of this, that silence is not the absence of sound. Silence is all sound together. So the universe for me sounds like 1800 megahertz plus plus 1100 megahertz over here and 1800 over here. That's what the universe sounds like. If I sit still in a room that's quiet, that's the sound of the universe now for me and for a lot of people. And just because you don't have ringing in your ears doesn't make this any less true. The universe sounds like wherever you are. Awesome. Next. Yeah, the dark sound of church bells. Yeah, it's super cool, isn't it? I love it. I miss those bells. I lived by either on campus or by campus for 7 years. And you could hear the bells from the clock tower at my apartment. It was fantastic, actually. All right, 6. This would be Thursday. Emerging. Thunder and rain at night. Growth comes with a shock. Expression and duration appear in the first moment. This chapter talks about stillness. Yeah, it is. Yeah, 1100 megahertz is close to D6. I think it's an E key, is what I was hearing. But anyway, digress. Things cannot remain in stillness forever. Winter storms may destroy some things, but they also prepare the way for life. If things are swept away, it is appropriate. There must be an opportunity for new living things to emerge and begin their own cycle. All growth comes with a shock. When the sprout breaks its casing and forces its way to the surface of the earth, it is the climax to a long and deep accumulation of life force. We may think that it came up suddenly, but in actuality, it emerged as the product of unseen and subtle cycles. When the seedling appears, it carries with it the complete pattern for its growth, perhaps even the markings of an enormous tree. Although time and the right conditions are necessary, neither of those factors adds anything to the inherent nature of the seedling. It completely embodies its own destiny. Therefore, the growth and character of the plant and its very life are all present at the moment of emerging. So, let's talk about this one. A tree is another great example of how to live your life kind of in the flow or in harmony of Tao, the way of nature, the way of all things. To rephrase this a little bit, a seed, there's a lot going on in a seed when you plant it, isn't there? There's chemical reactions, there's biological reactions, it's taking in nutrients from the soil, the water, the sunlight. There's a lot going on in that seed. So even though it's small and seems useless, it has everything it needs to become a magnificent tree with no help internally, right? It doesn't need to do anything. It just needs to live its life. Oh man, let's see. The suddenness, the spontaneity. So in in your life, we are told to do lots of things, aren't we? We are told to go to school, go to work, all the things we talked about earlier. The seed doesn't need to be told how to be a tree. It just is. And so too can we. No one needs to tell you or me how to be a human. You are a human. One of the things I don't enjoy about my culture is that we have this notion that we're somehow broken, right? That but somehow nature messed up. Maybe God messed up, or whatever deity you think exists or you believe in, maybe they messed up, right? That there's no, or maybe through some, form or action of mine that I am broken, which is the most untrue statement you could possibly say about yourself. It's damaging, isn't it? I mean, think about, anxiety disorders and eating disorders and all the diagnoses, the mental diagnoses we have now that teach us that we are not correct human beings. Imagine you walked out to a tree and this tree grew sideways, right? It came up, went like this, and got to better sunlight. Maybe there was a building in the way or something, right? So it has to grow this weird kind of crooked way, and there are a bunch of knots in it, right? There's a great story in Zhuangzi about that, where these two guys walk up to this tree and they're like, man, we can't, this tree is awful. Like, what's this tree for? Like it doesn't provide us a lot of shade because its leaves are all janky. We can't cut it down and use it for timber because there's so many knots in the wood, we'd never be able to cut it. And they just don't like it. So a guy walks up to him and is like, how can you say that about this tree? Like, how can a tree be anything other than what it is? Like, I can sit on this tree as a stump, or as I can, since it grows all crooked, you can sit on it. You can use its leaves for, I think in the book they say it's like medicine, or, boil it into tea, right? Like there are, maybe a bird or, where I am, maybe a chipmunk or a squirrel, or, there are many uses for this tree other than what you think its uses are. And so too are we. There are many uses for us. Like we are more than the sum of our parts. We are not broken. You grew exactly the way you were going to grow. And that's it. Worrying about yesterday is regret. Worrying about tomorrow is anxiety. Focusing on today is today. Chapter 7. This is, let's see, let me use my fingers. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Let's see, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Cool. So this is it. Forbearance. Big word. We got 10 minutes left, so good. This is going to be good. Arctic breath coils the mountain, rattling the forest's bones. Raindrops cling to branches, jeweled adornment flung to earth. Trees in the winter lose their leaves. Some trees may even fall during storms, but most stand patiently and bear their fortune. They endure rain, snow, wind, and cold. They bear the adornment of glycerin raindrops, glimmering icicles, or crowns of snow without care. They are not concerned when such lustrous splendor is dashed to the ground. They stand and they wait, the power of their growth apparently dormant, but inside, or I can't say that word, is building imperceptibly. There is a forbearance of being true to their inner natures. It is with this power that they withstand both the vicissitudes and adornment of life. For neither bad fortune nor good fortune will alter what they are. We should be the same way. We may have great fortune or bad, but we should patiently bear both. No matter what, we must always be true or in ourselves. There's a great story by a man named Alan Watts. If you don't know who Alan Watts is, he was a mid 20th century philosopher, speaker, writer, amazing guy, amazing thinker. He made up this story about the Chinese farmer. I'm going to try and tell it here in these last few minutes. There once was a Chinese farmer, and he raised horses. And one day, his horse ran off. And the villagers came around that night, and they said, well, that's too bad. And he said, maybe. The next day, the horse came back and brought with it 7 more wild stallions. And later that day, the villagers came back and they said, well, isn't that awesome? Isn't that great? And the farmer said, maybe. Well, the next day, his son was riding the horse, trying to tame it. He fell off and broke his leg. The villagers came around and they said, oh, that's too bad. And he said, maybe. Well, the next day, the conscription officers from the army came around and trying to collect all able-bodied men to join the army. And because the son had a broken leg, they passed him by. The villagers came around and said, well, isn't that wonderful? And he said, maybe. So the point of the story is that you can't know what is good fortune or bad fortune. It's impossible. There are a billion, trillion actions that had to happen to get you where you are at this exact moment that you can't possibly imagine. I mean, just think about what we know of history from all the wars, all the countries that have come and gone. I mean, then into interstellar history with the sun and the planets and the bodies smashing into each other. And even before that, with whatever came before that. I mean, they have to happen in that order over billions of years for you to get here. Like, how insane is that? So if one of those things changes, even if it's something we would consider bad, do you exist? I don't know. Probably not. Maybe. Who knows? So when we look at that at a micro level, on our lifetime level, we have no way of knowing what any one action will do. Think of it's called the butterfly effect, right? Where a butterfly's wings can start, what is it, like a tidal wave, right? Where some butterfly off in Japan flaps its wings and like a giant wave washes, across the shore of California and like wipes out everybody. And it's a little extreme, but that's what that means, is that you don't know the actions of even the smallest things can have consequences that are far beyond our ability to reason. And that's what came to mind when I read this. Being true to who you are and not caring about good or bad fortune. There's a book that I have. I don't have it with me. I'm just now thinking about of it. It's called The Tao is Not Moral. The Tao is Silent. I think is what it's called. Great book. It's comedic. It's funny, but it talks about the lack of morality inside Tao. And this is a whole another topic. I'm sure we'll come up against it here in a couple of chapters. But yeah, sit on that for this week. Think about that. Like, if we don't know the consequences of any one action, are there bad actions? Can we categorize good and bad? And if we can't, then are people good and bad? We'll talk about that next time. Well, hey guys, I appreciate it. We're out of time for the day. I really, really appreciate you guys coming today. I'll be here next week, same time here on YouTube. Subscribe. Down at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that we do have a coffee set up for donations. We have a where is it? There it is. We have a merch store. It's all backwards. There it is. The TaoistOnline.org is our website. You can check us out there. We're going to start doing some really fun things for the community. We have a lot of goodies coming up soon. Maybe some contests, writing contests, maybe some rewards. But you can check that out all on the TaoistOnline.org. Thanks, guys. I will see you next time. Bye.